This is More Knowledge, More Wealth with your host, Gabriel Shahin. Gabriel is a certified financial planner and a registered investment advisor at Falcon Wealth Planning. This show does not intend to provide personalized investment advice through this broadcast and does not represent that the services or securities discussed are suitable for any investor. Investors are advised not to rely on any information contained in the broadcast in the process of making a full informed investment decision. Now here's your host, Gabriel Shahin.
All right, folks, lots to talk about today. We are going over our book, How the Rich Get Richer. It's coming out July 1st, and we just wanted to discuss going over the chapters of the book and just going over some of the key parts that I think are really big takeaways. And also, when hopefully you read the book, you can actually try to relate it to your situation. Because remember, it's all about learning from people that have walked the footsteps that you are planning to walk in. Everybody wants some type of financial security. And even if you're doing well, you might want to do weller. So who doesn't want to have a better scenario? So where I sit every day, I have the best job in the world, and I've said this multiple times, I get to learn from successful people every single day. And I've been doing that since 2003. So here we go. We're going to go over today chapter 4 on how rich people overplan. And really the big thing of how they overplan, what does that mean? Do they overplan a vacation? Do they overplan, obviously, their finances? Do they overplan for raising kids? What are we really talking about here? I really think the biggest things, especially when we're talking about a book about finance, and some of the core things that people try to plan on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, every time you get paid, monthly, whatever the case, annual basis, is looking at the first core element of your savings. And the one thing that I see more than anybody, and I've actually had people rip me on social media saying, I made a comment saying, save 50% of your pay when you're young, when you first have your first paycheck. And somebody said, I didn't have a silver spoon, implying I did. I didn't have a silver spoon where I had rich parents where I could afford to save 50%. It's so clearly they haven't been a fan of this show or been following me for quite some time, because that's far from the truth. But the idea is, if you never had a paycheck before, if you never had it from 2 weeks prior to you actually working. Now, if you're in a situation, or maybe an unfortunate situation, where you have to work because of a scenario that comes up, then sure, I can understand that point of view. But where it comes from is getting used to that saving aspect. And when you get used to saving 50% of your first paycheck, then all of a sudden taking advantage of a 401k that may be eligible for you, or saving into a Roth account, into a brokerage account, and start investing, you start to really compound that out. And what I've seen for how rich people overplan is they continue to save. They get used to contributing. Their mindset doesn't ever get used to a distribution phase of their life. So they actually end up working maybe a few more years longer than they need to. Heck, Warren Buffett, who just recently retired, is only worth, $150 billion? It's clear he doesn't need all that money. He has oversaved. He still lives a very humble life, driving a Cadillac, living in a 3-bedroom house, eating McDonald's every morning. Maybe that's the secret, I don't know. But the idea is what? They overplan. They consistently save because they also look at the doomsday. They look at the worst case scenario, what could potentially happen. Quite frankly, some of the people that I've seen start to really spend and enjoy their money are those who realize if they lost their job today, they can financially be fine from their savings and investments. And some of these aren't just stocks and bonds. Some of this could be real estate and so on. But they really there's some euphoric situation that happens with somebody when they realize they don't have to work because they need to. They work because they want to. There's some psychological thing that happens to somebody when that happens. They realize, hey, employer, you actually need me more than I need you. There's something that happens with your quality of work. There's something that happens with your confidence, where you actually end up excelling a little bit more. This is truly how sometimes the rich people get richer. And this is why sometimes rich people continue to get more wealthy, continue to have more success in their professional life. And there's something happens with that clear mindset when you're not worrying about money. So the overplanning piece, this is where people start to take that extra time for vacation, spend that extra money on the upgraded experiences. And it's just interesting when you see this all come together. And it all starts with what? Yes, rich people overplan. But then what they do is they enhance their lifestyle. But it all starts with the key element of discipline. By the way, folks, if you're just joining me, you're listening to Gabriel Shahin, Certified Financial Planner, and your host of More Knowledge, More Wealth here on every weekend. And we're talking about all important topics of personal finance. And I thought I would go over Chapter 4. We're going over the whole series of Chapter 4 of how rich people overplan. And I just wanted to discuss what goes through their mind and how they think with this. So sometimes overplanning can be negative, and some people do that. Some people are just really tight with their money. They're not comfortable spending. It used to be maybe from your grandparents or people who lived through the Great Depression, they couldn't just have it in them because there was 50% poverty at that time. And the people were poor. Even here in America, as bad as it may feel, that was a tongue twister. As bad as that, we have less than 10%. Like, you could say what you want, but times are actually really, really good here. And so when you look at, yet again, on an overplanning basis, you really have to take a step at your situation and look at what can you do, even if you make it hurt a little bit. I know Dave Ramsey loves this aspect of, hey, live like a hermit. Yeah, that's one side of it. But the other side of it is what? It's truly putting yourself in a position where you know by this date, if I save this much, I'm gonna be fine. And that date that you hit, whether it's at age or dollar amount, which you should know what that is, you better know what that is. Once you hit that, life gets more fun. Life actually does, in fact, get easier because you know in yourself that you've achieved your plan. When you achieve your plan, you achieve your goals. When you achieve your goals, then God willing, you achieve your dreams. And who doesn't want that? So the idea with this, it's all mental, actually. It truly is. So when you look at starting with your savings, as you see, it leads to a whole other magnitude of mentality. And when you look at other aspects of what rich people do, is they obsess over certain complications in their life, certain problems in their life. People are doers. You have to learn to be a doer. Because if you're not, then what are we even talking about? Quite frankly, you're not going to read a book because you have to do something to read a book. You have to do it, pick it up, buy it, read it. So at the end of the day, you have to take a now look at yourself and do what? You have to obsess about the problem that's in front of you. It could be a specific task that you have at your job. It could be something with your relationship. It could be a problem of a situation that's coming up. Heck, it could even be a lawsuit, God forbid that you're in it. But you are thinking about this so much. And this is where the big piece comes in with somebody who starts a business. They think about it so much of all the scenarios that can happen. It could be meeting with a client. It could be meeting with a consultant, whatever it is, a contractor, a construction person. I'm saying a lot of things with C's here, but you get my point, right? It's all of this is what? You're obsessing about the situation, the conversation. Well, if they say this, I may say this. And they're reenacting all these different things in their head of what could potentially happen in that scenario. Probably 50 things, 500 things, 1,000 plus things. And they're obsessing about it. And the time they get to reality, they're like, wow, that was easy. You know why it was easy? Because you thought about it for freaking 3-4 days. You know who else does this? And we hear this a lot from? Athletes. They obsess and think about that game, the person they're going to play against. If they go that way, I'm going to go this way. Well, what happens if they go the other way? Well, if I go this way and then they do that, they have this mapped out tree of every decision center that's there. And guess what? When I say how rich people get richer, it's more, I'm talking about successful people. Whether it's on the basketball court, or whether it's in your profession, or whether it's in whatever that you do in relationships. Everything starts with just over planning. How bad is that when you over plan for something? And if you love what you do, if you have passion for it and you're good at it, then these things sometimes come natural, because that's now we're talking about winners at that point. And that's where I like to say sometimes winners win. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about other attributes of the chapter of how the rich get richer. Welcome back, folks. This is Gabriel Shahin, Certified Financial Planner, and your host of More Knowledge, More Wealth here on every weekend. And we're talking about all important topics of personal finance. Today, I'm covering Chapter 4 of my book of How the Rich Get Richer. And that is how rich people overplan. And we see this all the time. And remember, I say this every time I talk about a chapter, we're more talking about successful people, just attributes that we see in general, whether you're referencing somebody in sports, somebody in business, or somebody in relationships. There are people who overplan for it. Now, granted, there are some people who are naturally gifted at things. At the end of the day, no matter how hard I practice, I can never win a basketball game against LeBron James, right? It's just as simple as that. No matter how hard I tried, I'm most likely not gonna be a famous musician or actor or any of that stuff. So the idea is there are certain things that you can control. And with this is the mindset. And there are certain things you may or may not be gifted in. And so once you have a role, obviously they found potential in you. And your idea is to take that role that you have, that job that you have, and you overplan of how can I be the best possible person for this role? And we know mistakes are going to happen. That's a very normal thing. But how do you learn from it? In every situation, there is nobody that is perfect. But how do you react? How do you react when somebody tries to correct you? So the overplanning, and sometimes some of you may even relate to this, but you can have, and you hold yourself to such a high standard, a manager can say nothing to motivate you. They can maybe kind of keep you in line, but they can really say nothing to motivate you more than you're already motivated. And so these are the type of people that I'm talking to of how the rich get richer. It's all a mindset of success. So if you know what you have to do, you want to do it at the very best capability possible. It's as simple as that. And when you look for some of these successful people, and some of the book talks about this, is it's always planning for the worst. It's literally as simple as that. And so now switching gears, when you are somebody who's over planning, because rich people overplan, you plan for the worst case scenario. So in my brain, everything in life is risk versus reward. Everything. It's really annoying in the Shahin household. I'll tell you, there's a risk to getting married. There's a reward for marriage as well. There's a risk to having kids. There's a reward for having kids as well. That's why people have more than one, right? There's a risk to everything, but you have to self-analyze what that risk is. So when you're at your job, you can't be scared to do something, right? Because the risk of the mess up, you have to look at the reward. And sometimes you could do some proactive things with it. So it starts with something so simple as a task at work and goes so difficult and complex as starting your own company. So this is something that I've seen from successful people, or in this case, how the rich get richer, of how people know how to analyze that overplanning piece. And you have to know planning for the worst, what that risk is, what that worst case scenario can be, and what that reward is. I have a funny saying in my, it's not a funny saying, it's a common sense, but it's high risk, low reward. Hey, you want to have beers with me? We can go out and get hammered? No, that's a high risk, low reward. I don't enjoy getting hammered. And even then, how am I supposed to get home? What if I get in trouble? Well, then my CFP license is in trouble. Then I can lose my business. Like high risk, low reward. You get what I'm saying? So this is something that doesn't just overplan, start with your savings account or stand with planning worst case scenario, but it's now becomes more lifestyle. Everything in life has risks and rewards. And once the mindset starts focusing on that, you will start looking at life a little bit more different. You'll probably value your time more, make better decisions, and more importantly, start executing on the goals that you want. I could talk about this stuff all day. So number 4 is I'm going to bring it back to different items, and more specifically, just kind of what can relate to all of us. And what I've seen for a lot of successful people is how they work too long. And now this comes back to maybe a first piece for people who just love what they do, or they want to work. But I've seen people who want to retire but don't. Could be maybe because they don't have the best plan. But another piece of it is they just are so focusing on those first 2 elements of obsessing about all the situation, what if scenarios, and planning for the worst, where they just end up continuing to work. Well, what if the stock market drops 50%? I can't afford to retire, because you have to cut that in half. Literally, this is their mindset. Nothing is wrong with that. But what I've seen, and people's sometimes biggest regrets, especially people who are talented but maybe don't love their job, but they're so talented they make a lot of money, is they just regret working too long. It's a very logical thing. It's a very logical feeling, and I get that. All I'm saying is, wouldn't you like to know? And this is why people talk to professionals about this. This is why it's good to have colleagues, friends. Hopefully you're in a relationship where you can share these type of thoughts with people, because sometimes you need that fresh perspective, right? We do maintenance on a lot of things in our life. When was the last time you've done your own financial maintenance? You know, you have your car for 20 years, you're probably gonna maintenance your cars, even 5 years, even 1 year. Your house, another big asset, you maintenance that. Phone, you don't keep the phone for 5, 10 years. Most people swap it out. Heck, I had a plastic surgeon tell me one time, I was 21 years old. He said this exact same thing to me, and he's like, why wouldn't you maintenance yourself? I started thinking, maybe one day I will get plastic. That's right, maybe there's a man version of plastic surgery just to like fix you up a little bit. It was very logical. But then we have the same thing with our health. We go with our doctors, right? We maintenance that up. What about our finances? This is why the rich get richer. They overplan. They might be perfectly fine, but they get that second opinion. They make sure they're on track. They're making sure they're actually in the same level or ideally better than their colleagues. It's just a frame of reference. Nobody knows what they spend. Nobody knows what they have. But it's an idea to give you, it's like, where do I need to go? Right? One person might fly coach, another might fly first class. That's a very different trip. Staying at the Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton versus a Hilton. Nothing's wrong with either choice. I'm happy either way. But the idea is you have to get yourself in a situation where you bring it back to your work, where you don't want to be miserable in a situation where you're not planning accordingly. So simple as that. Last one I'm going to put and discuss with you. By the way, folks, if you're just joining me, this is Gabriel Shahin, Certified Financial Planner, and your host of More Knowledge, More Wealth here on every weekend. And we're talking about all important topics of personal finance. And we're going over the book, How the Rich Get Richer, Chapter 4, on how rich people overplan. So I do want to talk about this part here. And it's funny because typically the first part of your life, what I'm about to say is very important and very relevant. But it's really when you start to achieve some of those goals that we talked earlier, is how some people really just cut back on spending unnecessarily. So this is crazy. This is where I sometimes tell clients, if you don't fly first class, your kids will. Like seriously, you have to start thinking about this. Do you want to be the richest person in the graveyard? So I've seen people, and it goes back to those earlier stages. It could be a generational thing of how they grew up, or some of our grandparents or some of your great-grandparents of them going through the Great Depression. So as we talk about this, there still is an element where you're so used to saving. Now you actually have to withdraw and start distributing. I see people mess this up often. And yes, even the rich have this problem. That's why we joke sometimes that some of the richest people are the cheapest people. I heard of the Turkish millionaire. That's one of my favorite stories of the Turkish millionaire that went to Vegas, that he said, you know what, I'm gonna go there, and they give him the nicest suite. They're expecting him to gamble. He was there for months. And then finally they realized, look at the bill. They comped all his food, comped his room, comped everything. They didn't spend $1 in the casino. And they ended up having to kick out this Turkish billionaire. These are real stories. These are situations that we have to self-assess. It's okay to spend money when you know what you're spending it on, you have that purpose, and more importantly, you have that plan. This is what the book's goal is to open up your eyes for this. A lot of us all want to be successful, but it all starts with our mindset, it all starts with our discipline. And when you understand that it's okay to overplan to an extent, then you start to self-assessing your situation. How do you get to where you want to go? And here's another thing. The overplanning piece, some people say, how much do you need for retirement? Not everybody cares for the nicest things. I don't care for the nicest things. A lot of people don't. Some of the richest clients I have are still driving Toyota Priuses in some of the most humble homes I've ever seen, including our truly Warren Buffett, who just retired. But you have to understand, what is the purpose of money? It's a tool. And yes, you can overplan. But I like to say, if you're blessed in a situation where you have more money than you need to, remember yourself 20, 30 years ago when you were building yourself. And I tell this to my clients all the time. I say, I'll tell you a story real quick about my wife. My wife and I, she reminds me I'm married into a wealthy family. She never did, she always finds an opportunity to bring that up. God bless her. And so I told her one day, I was like, okay, well, if we keep doing what we're going to do, God willing, your parents are with us 30 to 40 years from now. I said, we're going to be just fine. Quite frankly, we won't need their money at that point. It still will be nice. The joke was, I'll settle for 1/10 of it today. We need it today, not later. So I share the story with clients sometimes. Why? Because I say that, how about you talk to your kids during Thanksgiving and say, what would you do with an extra $10,000 to $20,000? Now, we're not talking about your 17-year-old kid, 27-year-old kid, or 37-year-old young adult child. So by asking that question, see what their answer is. If they said, oh, I'm going to go on a trip or I'm going to buy a motorcycle, you say, great, pass the yams. But let's just say they say something on the lines of, you know what, I will save for my kid's school. I'm going to save for a down payment. I'm going to try to pay off this debt. Maybe I'll go for a master's. You know what a good gift is for the holidays? A check. So these are good conversations that you have, where overplanning isn't just focused on your overplanning, but what you can do with the tool to help the next generation. And oh, by the way, where you're able to see where that money goes and to see them use it and need it now versus later, where it might not be that big of an impact. Folks, that was a fast show.
I love it, pass the yams.
I want to thank you for tuning in with us this weekend. You can always reach out to myself or any one of our colleagues here at Falcon Wealth Planning. Our phone number is 855-963-2526. That's 855-96-FALCON, like the bird. Or visit our website at falconwealthplanning.com. That's falconwp.com for short, where you can go and visit our Knowledge Center, which redirects you to YouTube. We have over 1 million views, folks. And if you want us to discuss anything on YouTube, on the show, whatever, send your inquiry to radio@falconwp.com. That's radio@falconwp.com. And if you want this episode, any one of our previous episodes, you can go on podcast, Spotify. We have them all there. And folks, we want to thank you for your trust. We want you to feel free and feel comfortable to reach out with any questions that you have. I want you to have a fantastic weekend. Have a great week, and God bless.